Hello friends, how are you all? Welcome to our CSS training session. Today we are going to talk about a very interesting CSS property, which is opacity. This property helps you control the transparency of an element. Meaning if you want to make any element slightly or completely transparent, the opacity is used. Let's see how this property works. The basic function of CSS property is that it allows you to make an element partially or fully transparent. Using a value, you decide how transparent or opaque the element will be. In simple terms, if the value of opacity is 0, then the element will be completely transparent. And if it is, then it will appear completely opaque. People can understand it better through an example. Let me open my code editor. So friends, here you can see that there is a div with opacity set to 0.5. There are two divs here, one with the body having a gray background color and the other with a blue background color. The class transparent is applied to one of these divs and the selector include the opacity, background color and margin properties. Now you can see that there are two paragraphs here. One paragraph is this and the other inside the div where text will be written. Whenever you look at it, the opacity of 50% is applied to the divs because the class name given is transparent. And the opacity values of 0.5 is applied to it. If I remove the opacity, you will see the color become a normal blue. But if I set the opacity to 50%, if it will become 50% transparent, meaning it is only 50% visible and 50% transparent. Now let's go into a little more detail about the different values of opacity. Let's see some common values and their effects. First of all, what is opacity 1? It means the element is fully opaque and not transparent at all. Then there is a opacity 0.75, which means the element is 25% transparent and 75% opaque. Next, there is a opacity 0.5, which makes the element 50% opaque and 50% transparent. Then comes opacity 0.25. At the value, the element it is 75% transparent and 25% opaque. When the opacity is set to 0, the element becomes completely transparent, meaning it becomes invisible. Now look here, an example is given. So I will simply copy the example from here. I will come here and paste it. So friends, now you can see that the background color is blue. The text color is white. The padding is 10 pixel and the margin is 560. This will be applied to all the divs, but here a class has been given the opacity 1. The opacity of the first div is 1, so it will be fully opaque, while the opacity of the second div is 0.75, which means it is 25% transparent. Now if I set the opacity to 0, you can see that the background color turns fully transparent and the element disappears. As we keep decreasing the opacity by 25%, you can see how the element appears to fade. When the opacity is 0.5, it's half transparent, and when it is 0.25, it's mostly transparent. In this third case, when the opacity is 0, the element completely disappears. But now, let me show you something. If I increase the opacity back to 1, you can see that it becomes fully visible again. If I set the opacity to 0, the element will be fully transparent. And if I set to something like 0.1, you can see it becomes very faint but still visible. If I set to 0.2, it becomes slightly more visible. I can control its transparency. For example, if I set it to 0.8, it will be 80% opaque. And if I set it to 0.9, it will be even less transparent. Friend, you need to understand one more thing. When you set opacity on a parent element, it also affects all the child elements inside it. So look here as an example. I will copy this code from here. Now friends, you can see that there is a selector for the parent element inside it. Properties like opacity, background color, text color, padding and margin are set. Next, there is another selector for the child element which is selected by its class name. you can see that the parent has 50% opacity, and this opacity is also applied to the child element. If I remove the opacity from the parent, you will see the both element return to their original colors. Notice how dark the color of the parent element becomes. Now if I set the background color to light coral and change it to normal coral, you will notice that the child element will disappear a bit darker, but the parent still looks something like this. Now let's apply to the parent opacity. If I set the opacity to 0.5, you will see that it is applied to both the parent and the child. The color of the child becomes lighter and the background color of the parent also becomes lighter. But now I will apply opacity only to the child. When I apply it to the child alone, you will see that only the child's color changes, while the parent color stays the same. So friends, if you want only the background to be transparent but the content inside it to remain fully visible, you will have to use the RGBA function as shown in the example. The background color is specified using RGBA like RGBA 055, 255 and 0.55. As we saw in the previous example, when we apply opacity to a parent element, it affects the child element as well. But if you just want to change the background of the parent, keeping the content unaffected, we can use the RGBA method for the background color. Here we can make the background color transparent without affecting the content side. Let me show you an example. As you can see, the background color is set to RGBA 055 255 0.5, which gives a 50% blue background. Now the child element has a light blue background. If I change the background color to red, for example, the effect becomes clear. The content inside the child element remains unaffected, and the red color will still be visible as it is. If I set the background color to lighter shade, RGBA 25500 0.5, the background becomes 50% transparent but the child's content stays fully visible. Now if I remove the opacity and set it to RGBA, the background color will be fully opaque and appear completely blue, while the red color inside the child element will remain the same. If I set the background color to RGBA, the background becomes lighter but the red color inside the child element remains unchanged. So friends, this was a small overview of the CSS opacity property. You can use this property creatively to design and enhance your web page. Whether it's creating a cool transparency effect or layering the content, opacity gives you a lot of flexibility. If you want to know more, feel free to ask in the comments. Keep smiling and happy coding. Thank you.